Hello, how's it going? This is Gonzalo Lira speaking to you live, and this is the Roundtable number 49. I've been away for almost a couple of months because, as some of you may know, I had like a motorcycle accident at the end of January, and I got kind of banged up, and I kind of like just went off in different directions and sort of like, left the channel here kind of like on the side. But I'm coming back with Roundtable episodes. This is the first one from since the break I took. And I am joined by three amazing guests, and I'm really looking forward to their participation. And by the way, I forgot to mention that I'm going to be continuing to have regular roundtables every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday for the foreseeable future until I crash in another motorcycle again. So until that day comes, here, let me welcome my guests. I am joined by Donbass Davushka. Donbass Davushka, how's it going, Didi?
I'm good. Please do not get into another motorcycle accident.
Oh, they're so much fun and so expensive. We love that part, the pain and the expense. Yes. More please. Yeah, because I'm secretly a massacist. I mean, can't you tell?
Yes.
Didi, it's great to have you on. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Didi's links are in the description below. She can always be found on our Telegram channel. And she also has a great Twitter presence that you'll find if you go to her Telegram channel. So go check her out. And I'm also joined by repeat customers. I'm talking about Russians with Attitude, my two favorite Russian bloggers, Kirill and Nikolai. Guys, it's a pleasure having you on. How have you been?
Yes, thanks for having us back. And also, I greatly respect motorcycle drivers because it's the most fatalistic mode of transport. And I respect that. I respect the philosophical attitude you need to be a motorcycle
I respect
driver.
them, but I hate them with passion. Somehow I knew you were a biker, Gonzalo.
Oh, how did you know? How did you know? Like my tattoos? I don't have any.
Yeah, your tribal tattoos.
Yeah.
Away.
No, yeah, no, I'm of the Hell's Angels, but the secret Hell's Angels without tattoos. Yeah. No, it's great to have you guys on. Thank you much for joining. Well, we're going to be kicking it right off. I want to talk about the terrorist incident in St. Petersburg. And we discussed it previously. And Kirill is going to give us a little précis of what exactly happened and the significance of it for a lot of people who might not know. Because, sorry, a quick parenthesis before I cede the ground to Kirill. The purpose of this particular show is to discuss the situation, both insofar as the SMO and the larger geopolitical picture, from the point of view of Russia, because all three of my guests are, of course, Russian, and they have their fingers on the pulse of Russia, of course. And so I want to give my Western audience an appreciation of how Russia has been reacting to the events of the past year, insofar as the SMO, and the last 2 years since the real start of these aggressive moves by the West. So, Kirill, tell us about St. Petersburg, please.
I think actually Nikolai wanted to start off with this topic.
Yeah,
so
I think I'll start and see how that goes. So, yeah, of course, the most pressing news of the last few days is a terrorist attack in St. Petersburg, and yet another life of a prominent Russian patriot was cut short by terrorists. So it's a very murky and bloody event. And not enough, not everything is known by today, but we will try to figure out in depth on our usual RWA news stream this Friday. But here I can outline the basics. So Maxim Fomin was killed in a targeted terrorist bombing attack in St. Petersburg 2 days ago. Maxim is widely known by his pseudonym, Vladlen Tatarsky. The name Vladlen Tatarsky is borrowed from Pelevin's Generation P book. So he organized a meeting with his fans in a quiet restaurant, and there he was presented with a statue of a soldier in a helmet by a blonde Finno-Ugric looking girl. And inside this little statue, there was a hidden bomb. So a statue was presented to him by Daria Trepova, a Russian citizen who was stalking Tatarsky the last month and was causing up to his friends and allies for a prolonged period of time, maybe for a year. She received orders from a shady curator And who is Daria? She's a run-of-the-mill, basic liberal Navalny supporter and a vegan. So naturally, she's not bright enough to, well, conduct this terrorist attack herself or to tie her shoes. So, of course, she's just a mindless pawn in this whole scheme. And some are speculating that her Ukrainian curator was a certain individual, Roman Popkov, an ex-Netsball, who betrayed his ideals and moved to Kiev, and now resides in Ukraine, like you, Gonzalo. But it might be just about any other SBU agent. He fed her instructions via internet and all the right moves, and he paid her $20,000, or not dollars, rubles, of course, 20,000 rubles per every step of this process, preparation of a terrorist attack.
That's around 250.
All right, yeah, go ahead.
Bucks.
No, how much is this money in dollars?
$250.
Yeah, it's not much. It's a measly $250.
Okay, Jesus Christ.
So she might have received $1,000 for organizing a terrorist attack and going for life in prison. Not for life, but who knows. She also received this statue with explosives from someone else inside Russia, in Moscow, to be exact. And
I think
whether
that's
it's
actually
a giant... okay.
No, you finish first.
Yeah, so whether it's a giant ring of remote-controlled Ukrainian assets all over Russia or some local group is yet to be understood. Kirill, do you have any more info on that?
Yes. So basically, every step since she's been arrested, Trepova has been saying that she has been set up, that she didn't understand what she was doing, and so on. But I highly doubt that because of several details. First of all, she claims that she received the statue from someone else, but she actually had a little workshop in her apartment where she made statues by hand, and she had been posting those statues. So
she might have created this statue, but not the explosives. Of
course, she didn't make the bomb herself. She's, as you said, a run-of-the-mill liberal hipster girl, and doesn't have the brains to make a bomb without blowing herself up.
But
so much is obvious.
Wasn't she arrested last February in 2022 at an anti-SMO protest?
Yes, she was. She and her husband. Her husband is an activist with the Libertarian Party of Russia, and he left Russia a while ago, as I understand. And they were both arrested over a year ago at one of the protests that happened in the beginning. But yeah, that I don't think that means that she's an extremist or was an extremist back then, or a terrorist, or an agent, or whatever. It's just more proof that she's like this whole anti-war Navalny liberal subculture is quite the tumor in Russia, especially among very young people. And so back to why I believe that she's trying to protect herself by saying.
But I think that she was aware of the bomb inside the statue.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, probably so. Yeah.
I did some... Yes.
No. Go ahead.
I did some detective work right when the whole situation was going on. I found her socials before she deleted them while she was on the run. And there really was no overtly political stuff in her social media. She had an unknown Twitter account, which she deleted before the attack. I only managed to look up a few of her tweets on the archive, but she appeared to be your average, liberal, depressed, suicidal thoughts, taking drugs on occasion, and like what you expect the stereotypical hipster lib to be like. And so from what we can tell from her own words regarding what happened is that she was contacted by Roman Popkov, the ex-Natsbol who was kicked out of the Natsbol party in 2009. and has been living in Kiev and working for Khodorkovsky and Ukrainian media for the last decade. And she basically said that he would instruct her in journalism, and she would get a cozy media job in Kiev if she qualified.
Yeah.
And as you said, he gave her specific tasks, and she was paid $250 for each task she fulfilled, according to her own words. This is all just of her own words and not the result of any investigation so far.
And by the way, all these words and this information, this is publicly available information in Russia at this time, I assume.
Yes, this was all published by media.
Mhm.
Well, except the birds. Basically, she deleted her Anon Twitter account either before or shortly after the attack, and she deleted her Instagram later in the evening, which I saw happen live, basically while I was stalking her. And she also had another.
Don't go.
And she also had another Anon Instagram account, which she deleted also before the attack. It appears that she was.
How did you come across the Anon Instagram, or was it widely known?
I did not manage to catch her Anon Instagram account. I never saw what she posted there. But on her Anon Twitter account, she appeared to be a bit of a micro celebrity, I guess. At least people knew her, and she was known
She took pictures
by a pseudonym. Yes, she worked in a second-hand store, and also did a bit of modeling on the side. Yes, she was a useful idiot, obviously, but I still think that she knew what she was getting into.
But it's hard for me to believe that this liberal idiot girl would actually go through with it, and actually knowing that there is a bomb in the statue, actually kill Vladlen, and for a measly $250 and a promise to travel to Ukraine and work in Kiev. Can you imagine the stupidity of this whole idea, even for a liberal? And it's hard to kill any person.
I think there is another aspect to this. She also had a Telegram account, which
the fake one.
Yes, a fake one, which she set up half a year ago or so, and she was basically only talking about Vladlen, reposting his stuff, and a few patriotic Z stuff she was reposting. She went to meetings, and I think this is what eventually caused Vladlen to put his guard down, because he had met her before. She had introduced herself to him as under an assumed name. He knew her as Anastasia, and when she walked up to him, the security wanted to search her, but Vladlen told the security to let her through because he remembered her face. And it was really well planned in that sense, really.
Yeah,
because
this fake Telegram channel was ironically named Осколки святых чудес, or shrapnel, you can say that, of holy miracles. So I think for a year, actually, she maintained this persona online. She posted mostly artsy shit, but also some tacit Z stuff. But this was an incredibly sloppy work, because this account was clearly not real. I mean that it was initially a bot account that posted inspirational quotes for Caucasian women. If you scroll back to... she bought, or her handlers bought the channel, so it wouldn't appear empty, because there were a couple of thousand subscribers. So, why didn't she delete all those inspirational quotes for Caucasian women? It's a miracle to me, because it was not very well planned in some parts, but at others it was exceptionally well planned. So it kind of looks like there were some different actors involved, but we will see for more info. So I guess let's talk a bit about the victim of the terrorist attack, the target.
Before we get into that, I want to ask two questions that are around. Number one, and this I'm just articulate it because it is floating around, but I think it's absurd. that the idea was that it was actually the FSB that planted the bomb because they wanted to get Prigozhin, and Prigozhin didn't show up at the last minute. That sounds like a crock of bullshit to me, but I have to float it out there just to say, give you guys a chance to say definitely no or maybe. So
Well,
what do you say to
mean,
that?
Prigozhin been in Bakhmut.
Yes,
So-
the
and
same evening.
He was not supposed to be in this cafe.
Yes.
No.
It was a personal meeting of Vladlen's fans, not
Okay,
Prigozhin's
so-
fans. Or
So Prigozhin wasn't even in
and-
the country, and it was
No.
just for his fans. So definitely not. And the what was I forgot. So okay, that's the key issue really. So the idea that it was an FSB thing and had nothing to do. That's
well,
just
we'll see. Actually, yeah. Let's talk about the victim and the something that we ignored to talk yet.
Okay.
So yeah, Maxim Fomin or Vladlen Tatarsky was a Makiivka native. Makiivka is part of Donetsk region of former Ukraine, and he comes from a family of local miners, seemingly unremarkable, really working class, but he never lacked ambitions. In 2011, he was involved in bank robbery in Makiivka and was sentenced to Ukrainian prison for 12 years. And actually, I think personally that robbing banks is the most noble of crimes. So
I agree. I agree.
yeah, and in 2014, amidst all the chaos that ensued in Donbass and Ukraine in general, he fled the prison and joined Donetsk rebels against the Ukrainian military junta. And after 5 years of serving in Donetsk militia, he left the service and went to Moscow to pursue a journalistic and literary career. He wrote a book called The Run, or Beg, dedicated to his military adventures in former Eastern Ukraine, and he became a Russian citizen. So when the war began, he became a war correspondent and returned to his homeland in this new role. And unlike many other Russian correspondents, he never pulled any punches. I was not a hugest fan of him, but he was entertaining to me. He had this persona of a rowdy bandit with a heart of gold type stuff, and who is surprisingly well versed in Bible. So he talked like Donetsk Gopnik, but always threw some verses from Bible in his speech. It was really unique. So I guess
he actually studied at a seminary for some time after the war.
Yeah, it shows.
Really?
And
a bank robber, seminarian.
Very entertaining guy.
Yeah, he was a deeply faithful person.
Okay. No,
so he amassed quite a big audience on Telegram, and was arguably one of the most popular ones among other Russian correspondents.
Roughly how many are we talking about on Telegram?
500,000. And
so
it's actually a big number, believe me, because Telegram is a blog platform, so you have to read, it's in Russian and it's aimed at adults, politically involved crowd. So 500,000 is a great big number. And so
Chad here is telling me it's 550. I mean, that's quite a sizable audience for the kind of topic he's covering. Yeah. So he had an impact.
So I had some questions, really, especially yesterday when not all the information was available, and had my doubts about that because, he was not a top target and is not a top target for Ukrainians first, of course. But and also it's quite suspicious and murky. But what do we know right now is that
can I say something?
We know how he was killed, but we don't really know the whole reign of people and the whole chain of command. Was it really Roman Popkov? Probably, but who was between this Daria Trepova, who manufactured the explosives? And there are a lot of interesting questions, and I need to know the answers, because before that, we can't really be sure 100%. We can be sure
really sure of what?
99%. Well, of responsibility, and yeah.
Well, my thinking is that probably they might have targeted him because he was the easiest to get to. Because you're saying that he was not the most notable, right? That there would be, to put it in very ugly terms, higher priority targets. But precisely because he was more relaxed about security and visibility and actively going out to meet fans, that might have provided the opportunity and say, hey, let's go for this guy. You see what I mean? Especially after the Daria Medina thing in August.
I think that SBU is specifically choosing targets like this, who are popular, but who are nonetheless like soft targets, who don't have security, who really often go out, who you can meet in random places. And because, well, as you say, Gonzalo, is easier. And also, I think they are trying to find like the golden middle of targets who are high profile, but at the same time won't produce the pressing need for an immediate and escalatory retaliation by Russia. Because if they were assassinating, I don't know, government officials, then that I think there would be, like in game theory terms, it would be a very pressing need for Russia to retaliate and immediately and very harshly. But by choosing basically, I'm not sure if I would call Vladlen really a civilian. I mean, he in the early part of the SMO, he was more of a combatant really than a war correspondent, and he went on to become a full-time journalist only after Mariupol. He participated in the Battle of Mariupol as a soldier.
He fought, yeah, okay.
Yes. And since then, he was actively involved in military stuff. Like he was a big and early proponent of the use of drones, of small commercial drones. And even before the SMO, he was interested in the topic, and he was in the last year, he was also like driving around the country, teaching soldiers how to work with drones. So he was big on that topic.
So you're really talking about somebody who was like sort of like military towards like propaganda, because I'm assuming, of course, that he was all gung-ho, his content was all gung-ho for the SMO, right? And I'm sure, as I've noticed, that even the most gung-ho Russian commentators often don't pull any punches insofar as criticizing the military leadership and so forth of Russia. So I'm assuming that he was sort of like in that sort of like in between kind of thing. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's true. So it's basically important for like the Z crowd, but at the same time not really part of the establishment. So somewhat of an outsider still.
Deniability. Yeah. I'm sorry, Didi has been quiet all this time, and so I hope that she's awake. Didi, are you there?
I said I would be well behaved, so I'm just behaving. I don't know. I'm listening to these guys, and I agree with most of their points about kind of we're still in the realm of speculation. But I wanted to know if you guys also heard about the passing of a law or some sort of measure to change the penalty for this sort of act to life in prison.
It's actually yes, I saw that so basically the law on terrorism to expand the scope of which acts lead to life imprisonment. But the thing is that according to Russian law, women cannot be sentenced to life in prison. The maximum penalty for women in Russian law is 25 years.
Right, and
regardless of crime.
And do you think, that's exactly where I was going, do you think that also is the reason why we see them utilizing women more, because that a woman was implicated?
I don't think they care about that. Yeah,
I think the SBU is just very good at using women.
Yeah, maybe because they're less likely.
They have been doing that for years. Zakharchenko, the first leader of the DPR, was also killed by a woman, and in a very similar way to Vladlen. And the SBU, Daria Dugina, was also murdered by a woman.
I think there's speculation that Givy was as well.
Yes.
But it's certainly not about imprisonment of these
Yeah.
women. It's about that they are maybe more gullible, or maybe SBU know ways how to charm them. I don't know.
And less suspicious. They are less suspicious as well.
Women are used in terrorist acts because they can get access to certain places, whereas a man would raise some sort of alarm. And so, I think you're right. I think it's a culmination of all.
Even Chechens did that.
Yep, the Black Widows.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The Black Widows.
Yeah, I was already like a bit of black humor. I read that in the 2000s, the self-preservation instinct was basically telling the inhabitants of Russia to cross the road when they saw a woman who was very obviously Caucasian Muslim. And now, like, people will have to cross the road when they see a young blonde hipster.
How about any women now? We're just gonna say cross the road when you see any woman on the streets. Yeah. So we covered her lack of protein, which led to subpar brain function, right? Her horrible political ideology, but she's liberal, and her husband is like active libertarian, and they're also involved with Nazis. Do we see how liberalism and sorts of Nazis sort of go hand in hand? It's not just.
I think you see a difference actually in modus operandi here, because they wouldn't use liberals for stuff like in Bryansk Oblast, because like liberals are just not really capable of the same type of vigorous, passionate attack as like Islamists or Nazis. So they use them for different tasks.
Yeah, they have to fool them a little bit. By the way,
but overall, yes.
About Navalny, I mean, the connection to Navalny. Has Navalny's camp said anything about these attacks so far?
Volkov endorsed them, of course.
Yes.
What?
His right hand. His right hand.
He joked about it, and it was a blast for Volkov, who is not right now, I think, in charge of this whole organization. Mm-hmm. But I think, the couple of things that I found weird about the attack itself, is that when she gave this statue filled with explosives, Vladlen offered her to sit near him, like in gratitude for the statue, and she was you can see her confusion and shyness, and she actually does it. She sits right beside him, which is weird if she knows that there is a bomb that could go off any second. Or and another one, I guess, is that she stayed inside the restaurant and left after the explosion. So technically she might have get killed, because not only Vladlen was injured, well, he was killed, but 40 more people were injured severely, a lot of them. There were there's a lot of shrapnel, it might have gotten in the eyes of some people. So there's a lot of casualties in this. So I'm not sure if I was to think like a terrorist, I would run away when I was. But who activated? Also, another weird thing about that is that we are seeing that on the camera, is that it didn't immediately go off. So it was a couple of minutes later when Vladlen actually took the statue and decided to put it in a box and possibly get it away from the scene, so it's not in the way of seeing Vladlen for the audience.
So maybe there was
the moment,
I think the bomb was detonated by her handlers remotely. I think that's the most likely.
Yeah, did you guys
like a phone call? Yeah.
you guys see
No, but I
that?
think that it could have been that somebody else in the audience
Yes.
detonated.
But
Yes,
yeah, there was a
yes.
clear observation. I mean, that
Mhm.
it's not a random thing, that they got scared that the statue might be taken away. And
Yeah.
it's so, yeah, either she did it, but it's quite a suicidal thing, right? To do it
Mhm.
when you sit right beside him. Or
Well, she
there was
wasn't
another
injured.
person.
Well, she wasn't
Yeah.
injured, so
Maybe she ran
probably
away. Yeah.
positioned herself in a way that she knew she wouldn't get hurt,
And
or
then-
it
Yeah,
was really
because
someone
I saw
else
a
in the
video.
audience.
Yeah, I saw a video that the Tatarsky was actually from what I think where she was seated, because I saw a video of her sitting down, and it looked as if Tatarsky was between her and the bomb. Could
Yeah,
have been that.
at the moment, yeah.
At
A
that
great
moment, yeah.
opportunity, but she needed to be really an expert and have steel nerves, right, to do that, and not
Well,
some
you
idiotic
haven't met that
liberal
many women
vegan.
then, because in my experience, most women have steel nerves. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
But I
they're
don't
much
know if
better
you guys
at duplicity than men. That's for sure.
There is a screenshot. There is a screenshot from the elevator of the building where she was hiding, a friend of hers, where she went after the attack. And when she gets in the elevator, you can see on the surveillance camera that she's smiling to herself. And also on the video that was put out immediately after her arrest, when the cops ask her if she knows why she's being arrested, she smiles before giving the answer that, oh, it's probably because I was near where Vodouin was assassinated. And I think her behavior is just very obvious from her behavior that she is not the gullible fool that she now pretends to be, who only wanted a career in journalism or whatever. I think she knew what she was getting into.
well,
Okay,
yeah, she's not.
let's take a macro view just to be clear, just
Okay.
to sort of like tidy up this topic and go in other directions. Number one, there's no doubt that this man was deliberately targeted, and that it had nothing to do with Prigozhin, and the notion that it was the FSB is just sort of laughable. Number one, right? We can all agree on that. Number two, it's definitely this woman, perhaps with other Confederates, perhaps not. Whether she knew what she was doing or just a willing, useful idiot is unclear at this time, but it doesn't change the culpability of the event. Was that an accurate sum up of that particular issue?
Well, yes, I would agree with that, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Sure.
And so ultimately, this serves no other purpose than to harden Russian public sentiment. Would that be accurate?
No, probably, yeah, and it will make Russians more scared to go at public places, etc. So yeah, it's
Well, it
quite
would, might make them
with
more
terrorism.
scared to socialize with somebody.
Yeah, associate
who's-
yourself with the war, or go at these meetups with war correspondents. Yeah, probably.
Yeah, but that would certainly not change the overall direction of the conflict or Russian support for the conflict.
No.
Russian public
No,
support.
no,
for the conflict.
No.
yeah, it
Yeah.
will do the opposite.
Yeah, and so
If
ultimately,
They are killing
this is-
our yeah.
it serves no purpose. It was just, I mean, forget about the human tragedy, which is, of course, we all agree it's horrible for the loss of life and assassination and the other people injured. But as a practical political matter, this serves no purpose and, in fact, plays against the Kiev regime cause. Would that be correct?
I would agree.
I mean, otherwise they'd be taking credit, right?
I
yes.
think that anything that hurts Russians is good for Ukrainians. So not all Ukrainians, of course, but for this
Yeah, let's talk about
Ukrainian
Kiev regime.
or the agents. Yeah, and the fact that she did not escape, that this plan was so piss poor that they bought her a ticket for tomorrow on a plane to Uzbekistan. The idiocy of it all. They clearly wanted her to, well, be jailed for life or almost for life. So yeah, if it hurts Vladlen or the audience or this idiot fool, it's all good for Ukrainians who are puppeteering it. But it's it's incredible how good they are at remote terrorism right now, and with all the cells and sleeping cells and all kind of rings, and how can they entice all those people via internet and via small crypto donations?
In general, this is one of the aspects that is not talked about much because it's kind of embarrassing for Russia and a bad look for Ukraine. But the Ukrainians are really good at this low-level anonymous terrorism stuff. Like some of the stuff I've heard is really like it's they are good at it. They use, for example, like in Russia, the most common form of drug dealing is dead drops arranged on the darknet, on darknet marketplaces. So not packages, but dead drops. And there is like people who do this for a living, these dead drops, placing them, and drug carriers basically. And the Ukrainians have been paying these darknet drug carriers to carry out acts of sabotage, like setting stuff on fire or whatever. And they are just really good at this human aspect of terrorism and getting people to do the dirty work for them. And yeah, Russia it's really difficult to react to that because it's a bunch of what basically amounts to lone wolves, with the only knowledge of what is happening is that they are paid with crypto. You can't really follow the money, and it's hard to fight this sort of terrorism.
Yeah, but Didi, would you agree with me that this kind of pinprick minor terrorist attack is, at the end, it's kind of like it's interesting, just examining it, but ultimately it's not going to change anything insofar as the conflict is concerned. Would you agree?
Not one bit. I agree with the sentiment that these sorts of things. Sorry if you can hear my dog snoring; she's rather loud. But, I agree with the sentiment that these sorts of things do not work on Russians. That they make Russians actually turn inward instead of outward. So I think that Ukrainians know that for the most part. I think that they're just happy to kill Russians. That's really just it. And to use this instance to send a message to other people who want to, even people on lower levels that want to just report on the conflict and express their opinions. So I think it's just them trying to send a message. And look at who the pattern of people that they've targeted with Dasha, who is kind of in also a reporter and a writer about the Donbass, and she was at least friendly with Vladimir, and now him. So this is kind of like a recurring theme. I would expect more bloggers and journalists in this niche to kind of be attacked, or at least attempted. So I think that it makes it hurts morale. I mean, it's sad, but it also makes Russia. I don't know why people forget about World War II. Like almost 30 million people died. One terrorist attack, or even the Chechen wars, one terrorist attack in the cafe in St. Petersburg is not going to make Russia turn around and say, this has all been a mistake, let's stop. And it's not going to change Russian sentiment. So I don't understand. I think it's just them being like, we can get to these little victories outside of the war and keep this sort of like rah-rah going.
I think another mistake they made, the Ukrainians, is that they did not exfiltrate their agent. I was really expecting, when it came out that she had not been immediately arrested, I was expecting her to be in Estonia or Finland by morning and be, I don't know, in the safe house guarded by Estonian police, like the woman who murdered Darya Dugina. But that woman was an actual SBU agent, and this woman was just a useful idiot they recruited. And I think this is actually discouraging. Like, who will sign up for a suicide mission if you're not even gonna get any reward for it?
Well, I think that I disagree there, because I think there are a lot of people who would be very gung-ho about this sort of thing. Because you got to keep in mind the kind of propaganda and social reinforcement that has arisen, especially online, on people who are online all the time, as apparently this vegan useful idiot was. I think that a lot of them have been just almost brainwashed, maniacal
I mean,
on their issue, and they'd be like, "Yeah, let's do this," without realizing the actual real world consequences that would happen, that would befall their lives.
I mean, I think you're right about it as well. I've been thinking about that, how one of the aspects that I also wanted to mention is that before in Russia, we have never thought of like liberalism as an ideology of terrorism.
It has become one. It has become one.
We understand the material side of terrorism, right? Passwords, explosives, safe houses, etc. But it's difficult to understand the worldview of a person who is willing to sacrifice his own freedom or life in order to bring pain and suffering into the lives of dozens of his fellow citizens. And it's like the standard St. Petersburg old girl does not fit into our idea of radical ideologies that make people commit such acts, like Islamism or far right, far left ideologies. But in reality, it was really a matter of time, because like for years in Russia, but in the West as well, but I'm mainly focusing on Russia, conservative opinion leaders and conservative media have derided these extreme forms of liberalism, like, pacifism, veganism, LGBT, and other soy things, as weakness, as lack of will and degeneracy that turn young people into weak-willed, fragile people, but not terrorists.
Historically and internationally speaking, we can look at liberal organizations like NATO that are more than happy to coddle and utilize terrorists and terrorism and terror tactics. Just look at liberal institutions in the United States who have created and employed things like Al-Qaeda, Taliban, and ISIS. It's just now that we're actually seeing the liberals kind of get more tangibly involved.
Yeah, but the average liberal in the West doesn't think that ISIS is good, and he doesn't believe that the West had a hand in creating ISIS. So
no, but one of the big developments over the last few years is that liberals, the old lefties who used to be against the CIA and the national intelligence services of various sorts, now they're all gung-ho. They're like pro-CIA. I mean, look at all the NAFO bots out there. These all are. What's interesting is the NAFO bots on Twitter, for instance. They always have a trans flag on them, or most of them, right? They are very much pro-liberalism, and yet they are supporting the intelligence services of the Western regimes. I find that development remarkable, because these are the people that a generation ago would have been adamantly opposed to the CIA doing God knows what wherever. But now they are fully on board with the program. That, I think, is a remarkable political trick, that political judo flip of making these vegan soys, in favor of terrorism, state-sponsored terrorism. I mean, they're all in favor of the Nord Stream bombing, and all of them now are celebrating this St. Petersburg bombing, whereas a generation ago, they would have been outraged to us that this is a horrible thing.
Yeah, and as I said, this is a remarkable, as you say, development. And I think this is one of the things that will take some time to understand in Russia, that that basically this liberal lifestyle, the one that Daria fits 100% like a stereotype, young girl, big city, liberal creative type, promiscuousness, drugs, antidepressants, therapy, and so on. And this way of life, it just burns out people, and it leaves a big void, and that void is like 99% nihilism and 1% blind faith in any nonsense that can dispel this emptiness. And
exactly. It gives them a reason to believe. When you have no belief in anything, and your entire worldview is nihilistic and everything is horrible, and you are given something to believe in and a specific objective to believe, it gives your life meaning. I mean, and that's true of all human beings. And of course, you find these extreme, useful idiots. I personally think that this woman that they captured, she doesn't know anything, probably. I mean, it was probably all anonymous, or the next best thing to it. And they probably are trying to get more context out of her. And I think that they're going to fail, because she probably didn't know anybody. And of course, the danger is that these people must have multiple ones of these little useful idiots running around St. Petersburg and Moscow and who knows where else. So that's a little bit concerning. But
Yeah, and what I'm getting at is that basically Russia in the last 10, 15 years had a lot of public debates and laws and so on, talking about, Soros-type organizations, LGBT, liberalism, feminism, traditional family values, and so on. But now it's a whole different discussion. This is not a matter of like traditional values or conservatism or taste anymore. It's literally a matter of life and death.
Well,
And
interesting enough, she's actually in court right now, and she will not raise her eyes from the floor, and she is praying in her fishbowl. So we've gone from liberal to now religious victim.
is she going to be carrying a Bible the next time she appears in court?
Funnily enough, she's wearing a sweatshirt that says Maine on it, like the state in the United States, like a college university sweatshirt. You know what? Like with the, it's very interesting. This whole thing is very interesting to me.
Well, Didi, I want to ask you. We've gone on through this war. It's very clear that the West is trying to decimate Russia by way of this proxy war. What has been the public sentiment in Russia? Has there been a clear evolution in public sentiment as to what the West actually represents insofar as Russia is concerned? And by the way, I'm muting my camera, but I'm still listening. I'm just going to get some coffee, but I'm still listening to you guys.
I think that, and I want to
I'm just moving my chair. Nothing happened. No bomb went off.
Do we
go to the toilet?
All the authorities yet? Oh God! But I want you guys, Russians with attitude, to chime in too. But I think that Russia has always had a realistic outlook on the West, but I think that the younger generations have been a little bit more easily fooled. And that now this is happening. I mean, Russians were like, I'm sure RWA sees it as well, but we're not immune to the stuff that people say online. We all see a good Russian is a dead Russian, celebrating attacks, celebrating children getting hurt, people talking about cooking and eating children, as I know it's joking and hyperbole, but
there's some jokes and hyperbole that is just beyond the pale that I just despise.
Yeah, I think that Russians are now seeing like, oh, like there really is a large.
They really hate us. That's
and I'm rereading a really good book right now, which I'm sure that's one of you at least has probably read, called "Creating Russophobia" by Guy Matan. Really good, and it kind of talks about that. Mostly from the perspective of the United States, that the United States and Russia, United States doesn't like Russia because they cannot understand Russia, that they're so much like us, but they're not. And why aren't they like us? And why don't they want to be like us? And they can't understand that. And
that's weird.
I
find it very bizarre, because I have come to the conclusion that the Slavs are basically Latin American, but more white and with a weird alphabet. That's basically my conclusion, because so many of the attitudes I see among, like babushkas, for instance, just to give a clear stereotype, okay? We in Latin America, we don't have a specific word for babushka. I mean, it's grandmother basically, but that stereotype, right?
But babushka is also grandma, yeah.
Yeah. but it's a.
But yeah, I get it. It's a concept,
right? Yeah. And we have that. We don't have it articulated in a specific word, but we have that concept. We have that notion of like that granny who always says whatever is on her mind, is incredibly indiscreet, right? And who just wants to feed you because she figures that everything can be solved with more food, And it's like, yeah, that's just like Latin American, okay? And so it's to me, at least, as a Chilean, I look at Slavic peoples, Russian, Belarusian, Ukrainian, and I say, oh yeah, they're Latin American, but with a weird alphabet, And so the notion that the Americans don't understand Russia, what specifically do you think that they don't understand about Russia? I mean, because that's the nub of the issue.
I think we are different. Why? Because we, unlike South Americans, are not emotional at all. And that's a big and huge difference between us. And this callousness of Russians is actually a big contributing factor to what's happening. Because before 2022, most Russians did not give a damn about politics or Russophobia or the West. They literally never thought about it. And so it was easier to tell them, oh no, it's not happening. Nothing is happening. There is no such thing as Russophobia. You heard it on TV. And a typical Russian will go, is that right? Because he doesn't care. And this not caring is a great, trait, but not always. With regards to politics, sometimes not caring is destructive. And I think Russians are transforming right now in many ways. And even babushkas are transforming, because I'm afraid this stereotypical babushka race is dying out. I'm not seeing such babushkas anymore that have this sort of uniform, this scarf on their head, and are very, I don't know how to say it, but very powerful. No. So we are transforming in a lot of ways, and a lot of traits that Russians have still or had are influenced by our Soviet past and are in a way artificial. And as generations change, we are seeing a new kind of Russian that is being born right now, because there is a lot of changes. When I compare today's Russia to childhood's Russia, for example, it's a different country, different world. And generally, I think Russians are starting to care a little bit about, for example, I was always... it was really surprising to me when, for example, during 2016, Trump's race and this wave of Russophobia, Russians are still in the election, and Russian bots, and Russians did not care about it. They heard about it, but never cared about it, right? So what? And there was never this defensive attitude to it, or they didn't wish to counterattack in any way. So I guess this is changing because, well, after a year of actual war and Russian-speaking Ukrainians wishing death upon you every single second, even the stone-cold Russians can finally understand what's going on. And when we finally wake up, it will not be pretty, I gotta say.
Okay, what do you mean? What do you think? What do you mean when you say when we wake up, it won't be pretty?
I mean that when Russians actually understand, start caring a little bit about their situation, then we do things that are unheard of in a lot of ways, like in Second World War. Technically we couldn't win, right? The 2 years of constant retreats, and then something changed. And this change was not only due to some genius Soviet generals or American help, but this internal Russian mechanism, this switch. And we are getting nearer to this switch being finally flipped.
But okay, what does this flip switch bring? What is it exactly? I'm trying to understand.
I think actually there's a better comparison than World War II, although that is of course the biggest example in terms of scale. But I think the Napoleonic invasion of Russia is a better comparison, because just like now, back in the day in 1812, a significant part of the Russian intelligentsia, Russian liberals, were basically pro-Napoleon and thought that Russia was backward and bad and despotic, and that Napoleon would come and bring us the codex and freedom and so on. And there was somewhat of a spiritual fight, an internal fight inside Russia in the years, especially months leading up to Napoleon's invasion, and while he was on the road to Moscow. And we saw for the first time in Russian history really mass patriotic literature. We had a bunch of people were writing newspapers, leaflets, and so on. And patriotic songs, poems were being composed. And this was, it was of course encouraged by the government, but it was bottom up, not top down.
Yeah.
And this patriotic wave was really what allowed Russia to defeat Napoleon, because even like you had collaborationists even inside Moscow. I don't remember exactly what position he was. I think it was in Moscow city administration, and I don't remember the name either. I'm sorry, I'm really bad with names, which is bad for a historian, but one of the higher ups in Moscow administration, his own son was a Napoleon sympathizer and was going to help the French. And this man had his own son thrown into a dungeon for treason. And this big patriotic wave, even despite the fact that a really significant part of Russia's elite was basically brought up speaking French, right? A lot of them learned French before they learned Russian.
Yeah.
And suddenly they realized that the French are not actually coming to bring us freedom and democracy, and that they want to subjugate us. And when this came, it turned.
So you think the same thing is happening in Russia now? That they're sort of like,
I believe so,
on a wide scale.
I think what I try to say with this switch, is that Russians are not patriotic by default. During peacetime, it's most Russians would look at you with disdain or suspect that you are working for the government and you are licking the boot for some money. So when Russians collectively start becoming patriotic, a lot of things changes. But yeah, as of basically for last 30 years, we have not seen this great rise of patriotism. Not at all. It maybe some minor bump in 2014 during Crimea, but still most of the elites or lower elites or upper middle classes thought that it was dreadful. No, Crimea was never Russian or something like that. So it's hard for Russians to be collectively patriotic, but
but when they become, but when it happens, then it's a big sea change insofar as Russia is concerned. Its relation to the West. Yeah, because I don't see how Russia and the West will ever have any kind of rapprochement. I mean, I figured it'll take at least a generation before the damage of this last year and a half is healed somehow. You see what I'm saying?
Sure. Yeah.
And what do you guys think about, like, because lately various surveys have come out, and I mean, just my own anecdotal experience is that a lot of Russians in the diaspora desperately want to go home now.
I don't know. I'm not in diaspora. But I think
that's
I don't know.
A lot of what I've heard at least is that a lot of people who are in the West or in the various Central Asian republics are sort of like wishing to go back and trying to figure out a way. Even people who are residents and even citizens in the United States are saying this, which I find very interesting. And I'm not sure if it's a reaction to the Russophobia that they might be experiencing, especially in Western Europe, or if it's an urge, like the motherland calls, quite literally, and is calling them back. I don't know if they're being pushed or pulled, but
I think it's
do
both.
see that both. I mean, like, these things are always in
but it will get increasingly more hostile for Russians abroad, for sure, in the coming years. Right now, it's still bearable, I think. But right now there may be being pulled to the motherland, but they will be pushed also, even those who don't want it. So yeah.
Yeah, because it doesn't seem that the kind of hatred for Russia, it's one thing when they hate Putin and they hate the Kremlin and they hate Lavrov and Shoigu and whomever, but to hate an entire people merely for the fact of being those people, that's what I find frankly disturbing on the one hand, because I see it how very easily that sentiment, that racist sentiment, and I use that word carefully. I'm not one of these people who throws around the charges of racism casually, but in this particular context, it is a racist hatred for Russians generally, which I find remarkable and deeply disturbing, because I can see how easily it can be this racial hatred of a particular group can be turned to other groups very easily and very quickly to colossal destructive effect. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And I also, I think we can all agree that we want Russia to be victorious, but think about, and just like I think Nikolai said it, that it will get increasingly worse. Think about when Russia does inevitably emerge victorious from this.
Wait, I just have to say something. I just have to say, because you said we all hope Russia wins. I don't hope for Russia to win. I hope no. I mean, no disrespect to Russia as a country or to you, my guests personally. It's not that I want Russia to win. I want the conflict to end as quickly as possible, and for Ukraine to try to go back to the status quo ante, which will never happen at this point. But I want there to be peace as quickly as possible, and to stop the terrifying destruction of this nation, of the nation of Ukraine, and the destruction of the Ukrainian people, which we are seeing on a daily basis. And that's my aim. Whether one side wins or another, I am quite frankly indifferent. All I want is I just want to make that clear, because I am not pro-Russian. I am pro-peace. I'm a pacifist in this regard. I see the cards on the table, and I recognize that the Russians are going to win. And so if the Russians are inevitably going to win because they have a larger army, they're better equipped, better led, better everything, then let's hope that it's quick, to end the suffering, the needless destruction of Ukraine. But I mean, I just wanted to point that caveat. I am not unsympathetic to the Russian cause, and in this cause in particular, when you look at it objectively, it's very clear that the Russians were provoked into this conflict, and that they would have been poked and with more and greater provocations until they entered it. And it was clearly a Washington-Brussels plan to get Russia into this conflict. But I mean, I'm not taking sides. I just wanted to say that. And sorry, Didi, I interrupted.
No, my apologies. My apologies.
No, don't worry about it. I just wanted to clarify my position so that it's so that everybody knows. I'm trying to be an honest broker and look at things objectively. But like I said, I don't want anybody to win, like one side or another to win per se. I just want this needless suffering and destruction to end as quickly as possible. That's all I wish.
And so, I'm glad you stopped me, because now I'm like, I think regardless of outcome, the backlash and the blowback on Russians and Russia is going to be, from the West, obviously we're speaking on that, but is going to be unbearable, especially for the people. I mean, what is the quote? We've defeated fascism and they will never forgive us for it. Yeah. I don't think they'll ever forgive us for this, no matter what kind of outcome there is.
Oh, the outcome is obvious. I mean, Russia will win. It's inevitable. Okay, and it's just a matter of numbers at the end of the day. And if you're fighting an attritional war, as this is, even if you are being sloppy about it, and it's just a 1-to-1 kill ratio, the bigger army is inevitably going to win. And of course, the numbers that I at least have been seeing, and gentlemen, I'd ask you to give me your numbers, your figures, what you have lately. The number I see is across the board, it's lopsided, from anywhere from 5-to-1 in all weapons categories and troops, all the way to 10-to-1 in Russia's favor. And so it's inevitable that Russia is going to win this conflict, not not because I'm on one side or another, but it's just a matter of numbers. Kirill, Nikolai, do you agree with this?
Those are theoretical numbers, and on the ground, I don't think we have such a lopsided ratio at all. But yeah, all of it really looks like the Irish-British conflict of the last century, but of course on the much larger scale. And I mean, we have our own Northern Ireland, Novorossiya, and our enemies have a vast network of terrorists. And also there is a religious aspect of this war. And it might also last 2.5 years, or more. But I'm sure that there will also be a civil war in Ukraine after we sign a peace treaty, just like in Ireland after the war. So I'm not sure that I agree with your pacifist position because, well, yeah, I'm not sure that it will get peaceful even when Russia will not wage war anymore. And the only difference is that, of course, Ireland relied on its own resources and men exclusively, and the other one is that we are going to win, unlike the British. But we are more similar, I guess, to the Brits in some ways, especially with the IRA style terrorist attacks all over the place.
But well, let's get into the numbers a little bit, because these are the numbers that I'm managing at this time. Insofar as Ukraine losses, the last credible number that I got was at the end of January, that it was approximately 157,000 Ukraine dead, and another 35,000 missing, presumed dead, or missing captured. And insofar as the Russian side, and this is from the BBC and Media Zona, they were saying that all Russian losses, LPR, DPR, Wagner, and Chechen fighters and Russian army, was not more than 20,000. So, and that was as of the end of January. Those are the numbers that I credibly manage, and I can give sources for both numbers. And that's a lopsided ratio of 8-1 insofar as killed in this conflict. And 157,000 killed, and presumably another 35,000 also out of commission, perhaps presumed dead. That is catastrophic for the Ukrainian nation insofar as demographics are concerned in the future. And what numbers do you guys handle at this time?
I really don't, and yeah, I would not state any numbers as of now. But yeah, what about you, Kirill?
Yeah, regarding numbers, I think the BBC Mediazona method is quite solid. They are looking for obituaries, social media posts, and so on. It's a solid methodology, and I think that their numbers are probably somewhere close to reality. I have been usually, for my personal estimates, multiplying their numbers by like 1.5 or 2, depending on situation, because there will always be a number of like unaccounted or MIA who are not confirmed dead and so on. So I think Russian overall losses are currently probably in the area of 30,000.
Okay.
Somewhere around that would be my personal estimate. And for Ukraine, it's yes, right now. And for Ukrainian losses, it's just incredibly hard to estimate because they are much better at like not reporting their numbers and covering them up. There is a Russian blogger who does the same thing that BBC and Mediazona do. So basically, he's scouring local Ukrainian media for obituaries and social media posts and so on. He does sadly not publish his database, and I think he hasn't put out an overall number for a while, but it is over 120,000 from what he said. So I mean, of course, I got
the most conservative figures would be 4-1 insofar as ratios are concerned.
Yes, and I think it's. I mean, it's easily explicable by like the much better Russian deep strike capabilities and artillery advantage and so on. And yes, I think 4-1 is probably the ratio that is most realistic estimate at this time. At least
some anecdotally, but still, I don't believe in some huge losses for Russia, because I have never heard of anyone being killed in this war, in my friend or relative or work groups, and that including rumors or hearsay or whatnot. The only way I can actually see that is via internet, of course. But yeah, I guess if it was anywhere close that Ukrainians claim about Russian losses, I would probably hear about it, because it's more than 100
there
people.
was, yes.
Yeah.
There was a poll recently, a Ukrainian poll conducted by a Ukrainian organization, that said that I think the number was 33.7% of all Ukrainians in current Ukrainian controlled territory have friends or relatives who have been killed.
That's incredible. Yeah,
that is a very large number, and
I know people who went to this war, but they were not killed. So I guess the number is not that high.
Yes, yeah. I agree. The same methodology. I have around a dozen, I think, friends and acquaintances who either have fought or are currently fighting, and I know of there's no one whom I personally know who was KIA so far. But on the other hand, I don't know a lot of people in Ukraine, but even among the people I do know in Ukraine, there are people who were killed in the war.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I know one man who got injured, my neighbor. Well, not severely. He limps on his foot, but he still wants to, go and fight again. So
he's Russian and he wants to fight in Ukraine.
Yeah. Well, he already did so. He received some minor injury to his leg, I guess. Yeah, to his leg, and he is on the vacation right now to heal, and he wants to go back as soon as possible.
Hey, I want to turn the topic a little bit in a different direction. I want to turn it east, if you guys don't mind. I wanted to know what you guys are thinking about insofar as Russia's relationship with China. Because in the West, they're pushing this narrative very hard that Russia is the junior partner to China and that China just wants to exploit Russia. And it's very amusing to me because it seems as if the Americans in the West are projecting onto China their own designs for Russia. And so I wonder what people in Russia think of this new alliance, de facto alliance with China, and how do they generally view the Chinese? There's both the leadership and the people generally. I mean, I want to go in that direction. Didi, do you have any thoughts?
I stepped out. Are we talking about China now?
Yeah.
Sorry. What about it? About the...
What is the attitude of Russians towards the Chinese generally? Now that
it's blank. I think 20 years ago or so, we had some sort of sneering attitude to Chinese because Chinese make shitty products, but of course it changed when they're now producing quality cars and all that. I guess we are still in disbelief that some Chinese have improved their country so much, and we did not on the same scale. So we are kind of envious, but still we don't have any strong feelings about Chinese, I don't think. The only myth that I want to debunk is that for 20 years, a lot of people, and Russians included, especially Russians in Moscow, had this perception that Chinese are overtaking Siberia. Mm-hmm. They are doing it, looking at the map, and there is low population of Russians, and there is a lot of Chinese. That means that they will flood and take all those lands anytime. And for 20 years, I'm not seeing anything of the sort.
This is absolute bullshit if you know even a little bit about Chinese demographics, because basically the whole northern half of China has also a low population and it's falling. The Chinese don't like living in frozen wastelands.
in Xinjiang, for example.
Shocking.
And they are active, and the Chinese government has a lot of trouble convincing the Chinese to live in northern China and not just all move to southern China. And the idea that they would move into the Russian Far East is preposterous.
Yeah.
I think
it was very popular, even in Russia.
Yes, absolutely. It's one of the most popular conspiracy theories that Chinese are taking over the Far East and so. But I think this is a mix of two things, namely that Russians generally, as a rule, tend to be quite xenophobic or racist in everyday life, and we just don't like foreigners in general, especially those who don't. Especially I mean, like not in a vicious way, but in a wary, paranoid way, a little bit maybe. And especially if it's like a strong country. And the other side is that there has been an American psyop going on about this, like starting with like those bad Tom Clancy novels in the 2000s about China invading Russia and so on. And I do believe that it was the American game plan, and still is for a faction of the American government to basically use Russia against China in the same way that they are using Ukraine against Russia right now. So basically as cannon fodder in their colonial wars. And this obviously did not work out at all. No. Because at some point, American hubris convinced them that they can take on Russia and China at the same time. And I guess we're going to see how that plays out. But yes, I think there's also in Russia the matter of, like, how to put it, imperial pride. You know, it hurts the Russian heart to be in an alliance where we are not the top dog. But this
but basically, is that very widespread?
I think most Russians are appreciative of the alliance with China. Because, well, we need all the help we can get, right? And there have also been, especially in the last, I think, as I said many times before, I think the relationship with China was one of the reasons why Russia did not immediately move in to save the Donbass in 2014, because we simply did not have such a good relationship with China back then. And as you surely know, Chinese-Soviet relationships were a bit strained, even up to small-scale military conflict at times. And it took quite some time to go back to like Sino-Russian friendship. And I think especially the last 7-8 years were important for that. There has been a lot more economic cooperation, political cooperation, and
but
of
on
course,
on a public level, there is indifference and mild paranoia, but not much more than that. Would that be accurate?
I do believe so. Yes.
And the paranoia is probably overstated. And of course, no Chinese ever called me an orc or a pig. That's the major part in what made Chinese or China quite endearing to Russians. That we have not received any hate from them.
No.
Yes, and I mean, I think actually that most Russians underestimate how pro-Russian the Chinese public and Chinese media are. Because from everything I see, they are of course, I don't know any Chinese, but I know people who know Chinese, and there are translations and so on. And from everything I can tell, the Chinese are quite sincere in their support of Russia.
Our business partners are Chinese, and they have been incredibly supportive of us and of the SMO. And so they have been very vehement in their support since the very beginning. So that's my experience with Chinese people. They're not outspoken, but we've had meetings more than once where he's expressed like his full support for Russia, support for us. So that's my experience. And then you have other and just like RWA is saying, I don't think that people realize how much of an ambassador they are for their nations. You see so much outpouring of support from Indians, especially.
We love Indian people.
Yes, and
Yeah.
African nations, and even the global South, Latin and South America. So, and it gives you the warm and fuzzies, yes. And we're all smart enough to pay attention to actual governmental politics. But to see this kind of positive sentiment coming out of various places is also very nice, in addition to China. And I also think it's important to be realistic about how Chinese people and their government are, is that they're quiet, deliberate, and patient. And that in their last couple statements and speeches, that the things that they have said have spoken volumes about their feelings towards Russia and this alliance. So
yeah, I mean, from the Chinese foreign ministry, you've been getting over the last 3 months or so a lot of different position papers that not that many people have been paying attention to, but basically it seems clear that the Chinese leadership understands that the way of Russia is Russia today, China tomorrow, insofar as its relations with the West. And so my own experience with Chinese, I've done business with them a couple of times, and I knew a few of them, and the reputation that the Russians have with the Chinese seems to be very smart, like smart in a technological sense, and very tough, and just generally, don't fuck with them. But the Chinese are clearly, insofar as the political establishment are concerned, are looking at what's going on insofar as Russia is concerned, its relationship with the West, and thinking, next year or the year after that, that's going to be us. And so it seems like that's their current attitude towards this conflict, that they're paying attention and realizing that they have to, if not openly support Russia, although as a practical matter, Russia doesn't really need Chinese material support, but certainly diplomatic support. They recognize that they're on that boat because the West is kind of like going insane. I mean, that's how I look at it. I mean,
material support wouldn't hurt either in some aspects.
Yeah, but it's not really necessary. It's not make or break. It's not like the Kiev regime that absolutely needs the material support of the West, or else it's down the toilet tomorrow. But
I mean, really, it depends, right? It depends on how long this war drags on, because it also depends on how serious the West is about raising military-industrial capacities. But I could see a scenario in which in 2.5 years, if the West really goes strong on ramping up artillery ammo production and so on, that they could outproduce Russia in a way that would definitely hurt. So, of course, it's not a matter of today or tomorrow, but it will take several years. But it's not a scenario I would automatically exclude.
Do you guys honestly think that this conflict is going to last 2, 3, 4 years?
Yes.
Everything's possible.
Didi, so I want to hear your view on this. What do you think, Didi?
I do. I think that it's going to become less about what's happening on the ground and more about intelligence and like geopolitical warfare. So to me, I think that when I look at the war, I look at it as a 30,000-foot view, like an all-encompassing everything, the propaganda war, the economic war. So yes, I think that this boots on the ground, maybe, I mean, like Kirill said, anything is possible, 2, 3, 4 years. But in terms of the grand scheme of things, we could be embroiled in this sort of economic propaganda war for the next decade.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
War.
That's for sure, yes. I think it depends on how far the West is willing to go in Ukraine. Like, I am, let's say, 80% sure that the moment the armed forces of Ukraine start really crumbling for real, like really falling apart, we will at a minimum see an open Polish entry into the war.
That's what I'm
maybe
afraid of.
this guy, maybe as like peacekeepers in Western Ukraine, but maybe just openly entering the war. I am reasonably convinced of that we will see this, and then it will just really be a question of how far NATO is willing to go to expand this war.
Yeah, because I think that it's going to be sort of like a coalition of the willing, led by the Poles, and NATO and Washington are basically going to throw Poland into it as its next proxy once the Kiev regime starts to disintegrate and the Kiev regime forces start to disintegrate, which seems to be about to happen with this so-called spring offensive, which it seems to me, and I'd love to hear your all three of yours take on this. It seems to be a last throw of the dice of the Kiev regime, the last gasp to throw it all and see if something works out their way. Would you agree?
I guess we will see a couple of attempts at a counterattack before that happens.
I think one of the main reasons why there hasn't happened any big Russian or big Ukrainian offensive is that there is a sort of stalemate in the sense that outside of the urban areas like Bakhmut, you have a lot of just open terrain, just empty fields for miles and miles. And these are all mined to hell. And both sides have big trouble attacking over open terrain that is mined so heavily. We have seen the Ukrainians try some probing attacks in the Zaporozhye direction, which were quickly vaporized. We have seen the problems the Russian military has attacking Ugledar for the exact same reason. It's an attack over open terrain that is heavily mined. And I do believe that the Russian military is kind of hoping for a Ukrainian offensive, because to attack, the Ukrainians would have to dismantle their own minefields to attack across them. And that could be the strategic gap needed for new Russian attacks. But just attacking into the sea of the black soil steppes, where you have an anti-tank mine every 5 meters that can be placed remotely from 50 miles away, it just sucks. It's really terrible conditions for attacking. And I think that's why we haven't seen either side do any new offensives.
Yeah, but the West is pressuring the Kiev regime like there's no tomorrow. They're saying, you got to give us something to keep the money spigot flowing, and so it seems that they're going to throw it all in one roll of the dice. Because as I understand, they've assembled something like 130,000 troops, more or less in front of Bakhmut. That seems to be that they're drawing forces from everywhere to give it like one last go at Bakhmut.
I'm not sure if it's not too late for a counteroffensive in Bakhmut.
Well, technically, it was taken on 2nd of April. I mean, the town hall was taken, and there is a Russian flag.
And most of the center of Bakhmut is also already under Russian control, yes, up to the railway line, basically. They still have 20% of the city in the western part, but there is not much to hold on to, really.
So what do you think of insofar as the American empire is concerned, and what do people in Russia think about all the things that are happening to the American empire? I mean, you have the economy is deteriorating rapidly. The financial sector is starting to teeter, and it's likely that by September there's going to be a big crash of some sort. At the same time, you have this social unrest and all this sexual craziness going on that seems to be just off the charts. It's nothing like I've ever experienced in my life. The insanity and decadence that is on full display, and the Americans, their power seems to be just just crumbling everywhere they turn. And now, in the Middle East, peace is breaking out in the Middle East, where old enemies are becoming friends because of the Chinese and because of Russian diplomatic efforts. You know, I mean, what do the Russians think of the United States and how things are playing out in the U.S.? I know that relatively few people in Russia will actually be paying that close attention to the American situation. But of those people who are paying attention, to whom I would presume you guys would know, what are their thoughts about the United States and how badly it's playing its hand?
Actually, I think even those Russians who would know about that also don't care. So,
Oh, yeah.
but I've seen a hilarious poster yesterday. So there is a poster in America, and it says, it's a message to the homeless, tired of living on welfare, then join the Ukrainian resistance force. Something like that. So maybe it will be the last American move to send all the homeless from California to defend Bakhmut. Who knows? But really, I'm personally, well, I followed America quite extensively, all the news and such, but I really don't pay much attention to it anymore, as if something is not there. The interest is not there anymore. So I don't know
Whose
what to
interest?
say.
The Russian interest is not there?
No.
Yeah. Didi, what do you think?
Gonzalo, before Didi answers, I apologize, but I have to leave now. I have some things to do, sadly. So yeah, thanks a lot for having us on again. It's a pleasure to talk to Didi. Also, thank you. It's a pleasure to get to know you. And until next time, I wish everyone a good evening.
It was very nice to meet you. Thank you.
Lovely seeing you again, Kirill, and take care, and we'll catch you next time. And we're not going to be going for much longer. Yeah, Kirill, take care, and
yeah,
hope
goodbye.
Works out. And yeah, just to chat, just to tell you guys we're going to go on just a little bit longer, and then we'll be winding down the show. But Didi, what were you going to say? I'm sorry.
I don't know. Sorry, my housekeepers are here, but I don't know. I don't know about general Russian sentiment to see what's going on in the United States. I would think that there are some Russians that are like kind of vengeful in a way, kind of like I know that's like, yeah, I know that's like my own family is very still upset about the 90s and still mad about the 90s, so they might feel a certain way about it. But I think in general, the general sentiment of Russians is kind of indifferent, and I would like Nikolai to correct me if I'm wrong and what sentiment that he's been kind of observing.
There is a sentiment, though. It's very simple. Americans are fucked up, and that's it. That's pretty much it. And when earlier we had doubts, we had debates over it. Some people were incredibly nostalgic about like America in the 90s, because a lot of Russians saw all those American movies and they loved it, and there was a huge appreciation for Schwarzenegger, Stallone, all those guys from the late 80s and 90s. But now it's just a disappointment, I guess, because there was an idyllic picture of America during Perestroika, because the Russians actually believed that this was a ticket to paradise, that we will become capitalists and just like America in the movies. But and even out. America turned out to be a very different place, and Russians are kind of disappointed and they don't care anymore.
Yeah, they didn't get what they paid for, absolutely. And I think that's a lot of it.
It was better in the movies.
It's always is better in the movies. But I think that, just like Nikolai just said, which is so true, is that it's the cultural aspects that Russia just absolutely does not understand, like the culture of the rainbow imperialism and stuff along those lines of the United States, and like said in such graceful terms, America is fucked up. Like, it's the culture that's Russians are like, we don't want any part of that. like the rainbow imperialism, what do the kids say, globo homo or whatever they say. Russians don't want any parts of that for the most part. So I think that they'll be happy. I remember in the beginning when they were like, haha, like you don't have McDonald's anymore. And Russians were like, okay. Like, so like,
We
all
have
right.
вкусные точка.
Yes, which just
Yeah.
tastes better anyway. So,
Oh, it does. I want to try it.
that's what the West is very prideful about that kind of stuff, and Russia's kind of like over it. They're like, all right, we had Pizza Hut, it was not that great, and we're ready to move on. So, and Russia, I think, is carving out her own path, and I think that's what the Russian people want. Perestroika and the 90s were so terrible, but just like Nikolai said, is that people thought, here's the golden ticket. People left and thought it's going to be so much better, but the pendulum always swings, right? And people are people, and cultures are cultures, and they're that way for a reason. And Russia will never adopt the sort of Western culture that they're trying to impose on people.
I think they can, and the Russians are great at adopting it. Different countries, for example, and even we're too good at this. Actually, what about you, Didi? Actually, we haven't been properly introduced, but can you tell anything about yourself?
Well, I've lived in lots of places. I was born in Rostov, and I lived in Donbass, and I've lived in the West, and I've also lived in the East outside of Russia, and I've lived in EU, and I've lived
you're a perfect example of what I'm saying. Russians are great at adopting it, different places, different cultures.
You're talking about assimilation, and Russians are that's great at assimilating, but Russians are good at respecting.
Well, I don't mean. I mean, we are not creating some huge diasporas where people talk in our language, or like Armenians or whatever other people.
Armenians. No, I agree. But I think that assimilation kind of alludes to losing one's own identity to an extent, and I don't think that Russians are very good at that in general. I'm sure. Majority speaking. I would say this.
What's that?
That's my air raid siren here. Sorry about that. I'm going to go inside, so it's not so much of a bother. Sorry about that. I obviously can't help it.
Was there a boom or?
No. That was just my chair. Just my chair.
Oh.
But
sirens.
It's just very annoying.
You're welcome, Gonzalo. I just sent it.
Yeah, I'll send you the bill. Yeah, but no, the what I'm interested in is about youth culture in Russia. Is it because youth culture just about everywhere is so aimed towards the United States youth culture, and how they're in Chile. I would see this. Everybody would be like, the bands would be copying American music styles, and everybody, sort of like following American culture. But now the American culture has turned just noxious and just, rainbow imperialism. That's a good phrase, by the way, Didi. And so I wanted to ask you, is the Russian youth turning away from the West, or are they still kind of like gaga over the bullshit from the West?
I think it's hard to tell. Well, there is some copying going on still, I think. But there is not this sheepish admiration for the West anymore with the youth, because basically we have our analogs of anything that is present in the West, but we also have some Russian culture still. So we have it better in a way, because we have a total American clones and also examples of great Russian culture. So why do we need rainbow imperialism originals that are worse anyways. In some ways we there was a lot of copying going on, but in some ways we exceeded the originals, I guess. And this is the new with some influence from America, but there is an independent culture that people are living right now. And youth, I wouldn't say, I would say especially the kids are incredibly patriotic because they're aware from a very young age, unlike I was as a child or people in the 90s. In general, they understand that they're Russian and the whole world, or as it seems, is against them, and they're proud. Especially young boys and girls in like children, children garden. What the fuck? Детские сады, how it's called, kindergarten. Oh yeah. So, for example, I've heard a lot of stories about little children playing some war games that are incredibly relevant. For example, they say, "You will be an Ukrainian, I will shoot you," or something like that. But it's uncanny, and it was not like that when I was a kid. I didn't understand at all what is this place, who am I. Well, I spoke the language, but there was no real identity instilled in any sort of way. But
and now you
think,
feel that, now because of the greater patriotism that you were mentioning before, the patriotism switch that is being flipped, that it's becoming more prevalent among the young,
especially present at not the teenagers probably, but little kids who are now absorbing all the cultural events
because I've seen videos and pictures of little Russian kids going, they dress up as tanks and as airplanes, fighter jets. And they're little and, they're like, I don't know, 4 to 6 years old or something like that. And they look adorable, of course. But at the same time, I'm like, wow, that's quite the costume you've got there. And it was for the May 9th. That's when I saw it, that they were very, very patriotic. And it was interesting because that sort of thing does not appear anywhere in the West, that kind of patriotism. And you're saying that it's sort of like skip the teenagers, the 20-somethings, but it's really affecting the younger kids. Is that correct?
Which is more interesting that we also lost that. But it's now returning to us because, as I've said, for example, my nephews want to be soldiers when they grow up. That was not present at all in my childhood. I definitely did not want to be a soldier, although I liked, seeing some war-related movies or something. But it was not my dream. So I'm very hopeful for the next generation. I mean, there is a Zoomer generation, but the little kids are not actually a part of it. There is an Alpha generation from like 2010. And which is more interesting is that we had a little baby boom in those years from 2008 to 2016. And now there's insane amount of 7-year-olds and 8-year-olds. Not insane, but for Russian standards, because we have a relatively low birth rate. So it's the largest 7-year-old category population in recent history, and which is very unlike the Zoomers or especially the millennials, because this terrorist girl, whom we discussed in the beginning, she is a millennial and very not the regular one, but of course there's a lot of such people because they were raised in a very different environment and very that was not that people a lot of Russians were raised in the late 90s without any identity at all, I would say, and now it's changed.
I find Didi.
In terms
Oh.
of children, I don't know. I think Nikolai summed it up pretty well. But
No, okay. No, go ahead, please.
I can't really hear, so I'm gonna mute because the vacuum's right outside the door.
Okay. No, because I'm very curious as to what effects this conflict will have on the Russian population going forward. Because my thinking at this time on a macro level is that we are engaged in the Third World War. And what's really going on is the collapsing American empire is thrashing about, trying to somehow maintain its position as the dominant hegemon. And everything it's doing is almost designed, almost purpose-built to have it exit that position of the undisputed hegemon, because it's pilfering its power left, right, and center on all levels. Militarily, economically, diplomatically. It's just throwing away everything that it has accumulated, and because of these death throes, I'm concerned that it's going to have a war with China. That seems to be the thing, and even when you look at the propaganda that's coming out of the West, from the United States in particular, they've been positioning. I've been noticing this as of the last couple of months or so. They have been positioning Russia as the junior partner to China, much as Ukraine is the junior partner to the West. And like in video game lore, there's the final boss, and in the American propaganda, they seem to be positioning China as the final boss, and that Russia is not the final boss. It's China that's the final boss. And so we should prepare ourselves for that conflict with China. And it's very interesting, even people who are who disagree with the Ukraine conflict and see the Russians' actions in Ukraine as perfectly justified, they have this this very negative view of China. And they are kind of like gung-ho for a war with China, even though they are not gung-ho for a war with Russia over Ukraine. And I find it very striking that the Americans seem to be pivoting so decisively to putting China as the next big enemy that has to be crushed no matter what. And if their original plan of using Russia to, defeat Russia, break up Russia, and use Russia somehow against China, that plan might not have worked. So, okay, let's quit screwing around with Russia and just go for the final boss. That seems to be the state of, at least sort of like the vibe and propaganda that's coming out of the United States at this time.
Do you think that the upcoming inevitable conflict with China, and this is for both of you, that it will be hot war, or do you think that it will just be more Cold War sanctions, economic warfare?
Oh no, hot war.
I don't think that China is a final boss militarily. Well, there is no proofs of the Chinese conflicts where we have seen Chinese being extremely victorious or their military to be competent. No. So economically, they are the final boss because there is no larger economy in the world. But militarily, I would say I have no really trust in either Chinese or American military at this point. So I really don't know. I think that Ukrainian and Russian militaries are probably the most battle-ready, capable in the world. So I'm not sure. And it seems like, first they will gonna wage some severe economic warfare and maybe some clash in Taiwan or something like that, or maybe it really depends. When we see all those factories that are producing iPhones and all that closing down, that maybe we have something to talk about. But as of now, I don't think there is any serious conflict materially.
Well, no, my thinking is that the Americans will put China on the sanctions escalator. They already have started. And, Huawei, which was a couple of years ago now, or several years ago, but that was sort of like the inkling of where this is going. And the Americans will put them on the sanctions escalator, and it's going to hurt the American economy more than the Chinese economy. Just as when the West put Russia on the sanctions escalator, and it was Europe whose economy got crushed. My thinking is that the Americans are going to do something similar with China because they don't know any better, because they have a hammer, and so every problem looks like a nail. They're going to apply sanctions to China. It's going to hurt the American economy catastrophically. And out of a panic at this rapidly and severely deteriorating economic condition in the United States, the Americans will trump up some reason out of just thin air, just a lot of bullshit, and somehow get into a conflict with China. Because you have to keep in mind, there are a lot of very influential economists in the United States who truly believe that a big conflict, a big war, would be beneficial to the American economy, because they're sort of like stuck still in World War II. And they still think that the United States, the American economy, is the biggest in the world. And if it starts ramping up for a global conflict, this would kickstart the American economy. But the American economy industrially, it's completely hollowed out. But anyway, that rationale of starting a war and multiple different factions within the American regime thinking that it would be a good thing for the United States generally, and of course, to pull down the Chinese, they would go to war with China. And I think that what would happen is that the Americans would get a severe ass kicking, to put it very bluntly, and then anything is possible, because the Americans are extraordinarily vulnerable in the Pacific. People don't seem to understand it. The aircraft carriers, which were dominant in the Second World War and in the period thereafter, and were instrumental in projecting American military power around the world, they are extraordinarily vulnerable to modern warfare. I'm thinking specifically of hypersonic weapons that are, as a practical matter, impossible to spot, and that they can sink an aircraft carrier. In fact, many of them are designed to sink aircraft carriers. If the United States were to lose 2, 3, 4 aircraft carriers, it would be catastrophic politically in the United States. And my fear is that it would push the American political leadership, especially if it's weak, into the position of escalating with nuclear weapons. Because do keep in mind, American military doctrine holds that an aircraft carrier, the sinking or destruction of an aircraft carrier, would be equivalent to the destruction of an American city. Ultimately, there are 6,000 personnel on an aircraft carrier, 6,000 dead. And so, that's my fear at this point, that it will escalate. And frankly, I don't see the political leadership in the United States willing to stop this path that the United States seems to be on. Kirill, I believe, was mentioning before the possibility of Poland getting into the war, but the war here in Ukraine. But I personally don't see that the Americans would be up for a war against Russia. I do see them up for a naval conflict, an aero-naval conflict with China, that they would lose. And so that's my great fear, that they're going to go into this thinking that their air superiority and their naval power will ensure victory, but they will suffer losses that will trigger God knows what after effects. What do you guys think of this analysis, and what parts of it do you disagree with? That's the part that I'm interested in, really.
Yeah, I guess this is possible, but Americans are first, they want to use some proxy to fight for them.
Yeah.
So in case of China, who will it be? Will it be Taiwan? Well, they can defend Taiwan, but they cannot attack China. So yeah, I don't believe in American involvement, boots on the ground in Ukraine for this exact reason, because they have already a force fighting for them. Yeah. And with China, they probably need identical force fighting Chinese, and they don't really have that, because Russia will not gonna attack China anytime soon, doing the American bidding. So I'm not sure. It might be the case that they push out in the end and nothing really will happen. And why?
I hope so.
Yeah, because there was a lot of swings in American-Chinese relationships, president to president, and yeah, I think there is a lot of Chinese influence in America, more so than Russian influence, definitely. So maybe they will ban TikTok and be satisfied with it. This will be the end of this great war. don't
the
know.
TikTok war.
They can't even manage to do that, as far as I'm concerned.
What do you think,
Or did
Didi?
they?
I agree with your sentiment that the United States is not ready for a war against Russia, because that would require another ground war, just like Nikolai just said. And coming out of two horrible ground wars that were forever wars, I don't think that the United States civilians would be happy with that. I think that, but I do, like you said, because they would be able to engage China in the naval and air war, I think that they would be more inclined to accept something like that. Plus, you have Americans on both sides of the aisle, Democrat and Republican, who harbor negative feelings towards China. So I think that they would be more accepting of an actual conflict with China than they would with going up against Russia.
Yeah. So we're just gonna have to wait and see. So anyway, is there anything else that we want to cover before we sign off?
I need to ask you a couple of questions, because I promised to in Discord. People want to know. Gonzalo, did you notice any Freemasonry activity in Ukraine?
No, I would have no idea what to look for, to tell you the truth. I don't know any Masons, and I wouldn't know. Is there? I mean, out of idle curiosity, I have no idea.
Probably. The next question, from
you have
our
your
listener.
Discord has questions for me. That's pretty funny.
Yeah. No, I did not actually, but they demanded that I should ask you.
Okay.
Given the steps in Ukraine and their embrace of various mythic cultures, has he noticed any interest in cowboy culture? For example, is John Wayne popular in Ukraine? Or are there any Ukrainian westerns with avengers of justice riding horses through the steppes and rescuing long-haired women?
I wouldn't know. I would not know. I mean, like, here in Kharkov, theaters are not open. There's no entertainment of any sort going on. There are only just a few restaurants and a few hair salons, and and a few government offices open. But the city, it's pretty much like half closed. I mean, there are supermarkets and home repair stores that are open. But in general, it's fairly quiet, to tell you the truth. But then again, I don't go looking for any kind of trouble or anything like that. I'm very pretty much living the life of a hermit at this time, so I wouldn't know. But as to Masons and cowboys,
so you have not seen any Masons or cowboys?
Oh, wait! There's a horseman with a white Stetson, and he's riding down in the middle of the avenue.
Incredible. Here we go.
Just as you were asking me. Yeah, finally, I see a horseman coming. Or maybe the fifth horseman of the apocalypse. Who knows? But anyway. And what else, man?
Well, I think I need to show our live stream that will happen on a Friday night. So we will gather more intel, more info, and tell more about this terrorist attack and other important news of this week with video, photo, and audio materials. Hop on RWA channel, subscribe. The link is in description, and see you on our live stream. Thank you.
Yeah, so I was going to plug your stuff. So it's in the links is in the description below.
You can do it as well.
Yeah. Okay. The more the merrier. Okay. And Donbass Davushka, her Telegram channel.
It's Davushka actually. It's
spelled. Roll the D a little bit. Roll it over in your mouth.
I'm just too stupid and old at this point.
It's okay.
It's linked below, however you want to pronounce it. And any final thoughts that you want to leave our listeners with? We had a pretty good showing. We had 2,500 listeners, viewers, I suppose. Anything else you want to leave them with?
Big thanks to Brian Berledich, who has been sharing the stream and the YouTube channel, good friend of the show, and I'm honored that you asked me to be on, and it was so nice to finally meet Russians with Attitude after kind of operating in the same sphere for a little bit. So it was actually great time. I'm very glad that you had me on. So
and Didi, you should definitely have them on. They're just terrific guests, and it's always lovely to have.
Maybe
will
we
actually
have you on.
Well, actually, one of my co-admin or my co-host for my podcast is the biggest Russians with Attitude fan. So he's like right now just fanboying in the chat, like, oh, ask them this and ask them that. And I'm like, you just have them on the show and you ask them yourself.
Yeah.
All right, we need to call up for sure.
I will have.
Yeah, we are up for it. So you can. Are you friends with us on Twitter? I'm not sure.
I'll look. I haven't really been on Twitter that much, but I'll go look right now.
All right.
Okay.
So if you are, you can DM us. Yeah, and we can.
We will get in contact.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gonzalo, for facilitating this, and we have to do it again.
No problem at all. And so stick around after I close out the show. Chat, I hope you guys enjoy the show. Why don't you hit us with a +1 to see our guests out? I'd really appreciate it. I'm going to have a show on Thursday and Saturday. And my regular videos are going to be appearing every other day. I might try to squeeze out a video today after the show. But if I don't, definitely tomorrow there'll be a video. Thank you so much, chat, for your patience and well wishes. And I'll see you guys next time. Take it easy.